Hey, sixth graders, we are back in our data books again today. We are on page 14, which is going to be all about relative frequency. And I will explain all of that coming up here. So we're going to start with our definition. Relative frequency is the percent chance or value when you compare one item to the whole topic. Now, if you think back to the last unit that we did, which was ratios, it sounds a lot like ratios and it looks a lot like ratios. So you'll see it's almost a little ratio review. An example here. So if we took data on the weather in the month of February, I don't know why that's so light over there, in the month of February, and it rained 7 total days in February. We're going to look at the steps for how we would find the relative frequency of this event and this data. So our steps down here. Our first step is we are going to write the info as a ratio, like part over whole. So my part is that it rained 7 days. That's obviously not the whole month. It only rained 7. And in the month of February, we know that there are always 28 days. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to write it as 7 over 28. So this is my ratio that I start out with. Our second step after we write that as a ratio is we have to use cowboy and the horse to make it into a decimal and then into a percent. So we remember doing all those conversions like making decimals percents and fractions decimals and all that fun stuff. So we have to use cowboy and the horse because obviously 28 isn't going to go into 100. So I have to come over here and do this cowboy and the horse. My top number goes inside, so you'll see the 7 is on the inside, the 28 is on the outside. And then when we do our math here, we end up with the number 0.25. I know you can't really see that because it was light. We get 0.25 because we end up having to add some decimals and things underneath of here. Now, 0.25 doesn't give us the percent chance yet, so you'll see I still had to make my 0.25 into a percent, and that was always just the 2 slides. So 0.25, if I slide, becomes 25%. Not too complicated if we remember our rules from ratios. Now we're going to look at this image down below that you had glued into this page. This says this table represents coins in a bag. So there's a random bag and it has a bunch of coins in it. And they've written down in this first column here just how many of those coins are in the bag. So there are 3 pennies, there are 7 nickels, 2 dimes, 6 quarters, and 2 $half. Now, they haven't told us the total yet anywhere, so if somebody hasn't told you the total, you might have to add those together to figure out that when we add all of these, we get 20 total coins. Because then when we go to write it as a fraction, we have to have the total. So for instance, our penny becomes 3 out of 20. Our nickel is 7 out of 20, and so on and so forth. We write it as a fraction next. Now, they already helped us out a lot. They did the math on cowboy and the horse. Once they did cowboy and the horse, they turned it into these decimals. So they kind of did the hard work for us, which was awesome. But I want us to be able to take these decimals and turn them into percent. So you'll see I wrote percent over here because we still have to convert all of these to a percent. So if I'm looking at my 0.15, let me zoom this in here. If I'm looking at 0.15 and I do my hops here, 1, 2, 0.15 as a percent becomes 15%. And you guys remember that, so you should be able to go ahead and start making all of those into a percent. We're going to do hop on each of them. And then rewrite them as a percent. So relative frequency, all it is taking our data, and if they're asking us for just one piece, we have to first write it as a ratio and then turn it into a percent. And in data, that is called relative frequency. That's it for this one, you guys, short and sweet. Just have to make sure those notes are in and on your page 14 and you are ready to roll.